Welcome to Boundless Pursuit, a weekly podcast providing motivation, entertainment, and education to anglers and outdoorsmen. I hope that the stories you'll find here will encourage you to chase your passion more fervently, to open your mind to new opportunities and perspectives. Your engagement and feedback is critical to the growth of this show, and I would love to hear your suggestions on topics or potential guests. You can reach me at boundlesspursuitfishing@gmail.com or at my website, www.boundless-pursuit.com. That's where you'll find all related articles, media, and merchandise. Please remember, the show will gain traction from your support. Be sure to like, comment, and share this podcast to your friends and connections. I'm your host, David Graham. Now let's get on to today's episode. I've got a special guest today and a guy that I've known for a very long time. And he's got a very important message with regards to preserving our native species here in the U.S. Drew Geving is one of the founders of roughfish.com, a long-standing hub for multi-species anglers and a site that I have been affiliated with for over 20 years. Roughfish.com and what it's branched out and evolved into has been one of the top sources of information and media for non-traditional game fish. And what started as a core group of anglers with a shared interest in the pursuit of lesser-known or desired species of fish has really turned into a group of die-hard stewards of conservation. And Drew and his friends are now fighting the good fight through their nonprofit Native Fish for Tomorrow, where guys like Geving and Tyler Winter are taking action with the No Junk Fish bill, seeking pretty common sense protections and regulations for our native species that have historically been considered rough fish or trash fish. And what is a rough fish? I'm talking about fish like gar, suckers like red horse and buffalo, freshwater drum, and of course my beloved bowfin. And there are many, many more that could probably be lumped into that category. And we talk about the sporting qualities and characteristics of a lot of these fish that are growing in popularity. And the rough fish community and the promotion of those other species is very near and dear to my heart. And Drew Geving has been one of the most recognized faces and names in that community and in that scene for the last 2 decades. So it was just awesome to get him to come on here to speak on behalf of rough fish and rough fish anglers everywhere. This is Drew Geving of roughfish.com, the Rough Fish Facebook group, and nativefishfortomorrow.org. So we've been talking since I was a little kid, but anyway, let's dive into it. So Drew, finally, after all these years, we're actually having a conversation. We've been like talking to each other since I think I was 14, 15 years old when I first stumbled across the old roughfish.com website, which I'm happy to say is still around. It's like, I don't know, this day and age, those kind of forum designed websites are becoming like relics of the past. But it's good to finally talk to you almost a double a lifetime later.
Right? It's amazing. This is the first time I've actually spoken words to you, but having known you for 20 years or something on the internet community, it's wild, man. So just thanks for inviting me, man.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I knew when I started this podcast thing, I wanted to kind of go that, obviously the rough fish route to a point, multi-species, different fish, some variety. But I mean, my origins as an angler, or at least I don't know, my trajectory or my path down multi-species fishing has deep roots in your website, like you and your brother, y'all's website, roughfish.com. And I think I speak for a lot of people. Like, I don't know, man, it was pivotal to setting me on my path to, I don't know, fishing for different fish. So I knew when I had kind of like brainstormed this concept or this idea of doing the podcast, I was like, man, I got to get Corey or Andy or both or some of the rough fish guys on here and finally have the real conversation, because I don't know, I feel ashamed that in 20 some odd years, I've never done any of the meetups. I never went out of my way to like come up there, and I've fished with a couple of the rough fish guys over the years, but never any of the big meetups. But yeah, man, it's crazy. 20 some odd years later.
Yeah, right. It's amazing. I would love to come visit you in your current state down there in Florida, though, man. I got some business to attend to down there for sure when it comes to fishing.
Oh yeah. Well, it's obviously, I mean, I know you've come down here a few times. I don't know if you've been down here since I've moved down here
It's been a while.
five
No.
5 years ago, but whenever you make the trip back, it's obviously a wonderland. And I'm only getting a little bit better and better and better at how to fish this place. Excuse me. But yeah, man. So I want to kind of dive into the rough fish thing because that's a term that I'd never even heard until I saw your website. For me, it was hearing the term trash fish. It's trash fish. You have got game fish and you have trash fish, and there's no in between. And, obviously this all occurred kind of when, I don't know, there was no social media. You had
Yeah.
some websites devoted to other fish were like so few and far between. But I was real heavy in like the bowfin and the gar thing at the time when I first found your website. And I was just happy to see that like I'd sort of, I don't know, man. I was like sort of on my own path as like a young teenager, realizing I was more interested in having some variety than only chasing those same old fish. I was more interested in, I don't know, those other fish. So when I came across y'all's website and saw like-minded people, that was like the best thing for me. So the community was strong. The information resources is pretty much all you could find. And actually, to this day, it really seems like roughfish.com probably has some of the best, if not the best, like species identification pages you can find anywhere on the internet. But I don't know. I guess I'm curious now today, like what was y'all's motivation in even making the website to begin with? Like where did that start?
Wow, where to start? First, thank you for all those kind words. And folks have often kind of said the same sentiment where they stumbled across the website back in the day when formative angling years where they were trying to figure out, oh, what's this fish? And they Google it and we came up and they find there's a cool community there. And like you said, there was only a few sites around at that time. I'm sure you remember the Gar Angler Sporting Society
Uh-huh.
website back in the day that had a forum and all that, at the same
Yeah.
time as roughfish.com back then, creating communities. Um, and it honestly started out with just Corey, my brother Corey, and I were always multi-species anglers and just kind of exploring the unknown in our home waters, and just the lack of information about that was really kind of disappointing to us, and so it started out as, hey, let's show off to all of our, kind of buddies. It was almost like back, like you said, back then there wasn't social media or anything like that, or hell, smartphones, so it was just a
Mm-hmm.
way you could dial in on AOL and go check out, the
Yeah.
catches from people that joined the community, and it quickly became a way because it grew, and we got exposure kind of nationally, and it just sort of evolved into, this is a place where we talk about how cool these other fish are, and sure, it includes game fish. We don't discriminate, especially, way back in the day, it was have fun catching whatever you can.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's fun if you can get out and explore your home waters and learn more about the fish that live there, And then it quickly became, outside of our community, there's almost like a disdain for these fish that you see when you're out on these rivers. We've all seen it, right? And it's sort of oh, that's a carp, right? What are you catching? More of those carp, and and there's just an education factor that needed to come into play too.
Mm-hmm.
So it sort of became important to us to, and again, this is the pretty long archaic internet that was 25 years ago or whatever. So I mean, we quickly, after choosing the name roughfish.com, sort of out of a hat, we didn't know what we wanted to have as a website, but that was sort
Yeah.
of a catchy word, sounded kind of cool, and people
Mm-hmm.
kind of knew, at least up here in the Midwest, what that means, what kind of group that fish means. And we started just like focusing on having good species accounts over time. And the Google algorithms and things kind of like that, so our images started pulling up towards the top of results, and a lot of them still are today, which is
Yeah.
amazing, and a testament to the guts behind the website that we build. But it's, I guess, to answer your original question, the impetus of why we started roughfish.com, it was really to celebrate these fish that we felt weren't getting enough respect,
Mm-hmm.
or people weren't challenging themselves to think outside of the 5 or 6 game fish, and we see, um, you know, it's a chance for people that don't have a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot of means, but you don't need a big fancy boat to go, chase suckers or drum or around here, or
Right.
you can get by with a canoe back in the swamp and go catch some gar and bowfin, and it's that kind of adventure that anybody can learn how to go catch walleyes or trout or bass, right? There's 1,000 books written about it.
Yep.
The goal to inform people about these other fish has been pretty fun.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've always kind of felt that way when it comes to like rough fish or other fish. It's part of what I like about it is that there's not as much information out there. And it's like if you want to get good at it, you have to take more of a like grassroots or like boots on the ground type of approach and like learn it on your own because there's not a lot of information out there. But what immediately like that I recognize is like the little fringe groups of people that do it are much more welcoming, much more of like an open book, much more willing to like invite new people in. I'm like, this is like the kind of culture and environment that I want to be a part of. And it's like, you don't necessarily, I mean, you can get a little bit of that too in like, I don't know, the sport fishing groups, but you also run into a lot more of like people that are approaching fishing from more of like a competitive standpoint, which I enjoy a good competition. Y'all have the species competition, but it's more like of a friendly thing.
Yeah, it is.
But I don't know. I encounter a little bit more negativity when it comes to, I don't know, more popular fish that like everybody's trying to pounce on this one resource. So there's more of a reason to like try to fight people back. But it's also like the other side of that too is I always felt like when I was enjoying bowfin or gar or some suckers. I don't have as much experience with that, but I do have some. But you always felt like you had like a cause because I was very impacted from the time I was a young kid when I was more in like the bowfin gar thing. Like that was like my heavy to this day. It's still my thing. But when I saw people smashing them over the head, killing them over total myths, I was like, this isn't right. Like, this is wrong. Like, somebody's got to like say something. This is totally unacceptable. And so it's like, you almost feel like with that kind of fishing, you have like a cause or like you have this like responsibility as a sportsman to like right the wrong. Yeah. So I don't know. I feel like roughfish.com has been crucial in that. I don't know. Y'all have gotten a lot of good exposure. I know Field and Stream has passed through like all these outlets, but yeah, I share the same sentiment. I think it's our responsibility as stewards of the outdoors, especially when you start talking about our native fish. And you can there's an argument to be had with some of the non-natives as well, but it's like there's a lot of fish that are in that rough fish group, and I want to kind of get into, I don't know, defining what those might be in a little bit that like desperately need a voice or like a champion or somebody getting out ahead of the false information that's resulting on them getting thrown on the bank, cold and killed, things like that. But I know rough fish has been big, but roughfish.com, I guess as a website or almost as like a brand, as like a name at this point, has sort of like survived this interesting period, transitioning out of like old internet into the new. Yeah. And I know that you've had to like keep the things afloat. So I don't know, man. I guess in the last 20, 25 years, what changes have you kind of seen in the landscape of, I don't know, the information sharing side of things and just like the perception of some of these fish?
Great question. And, we kind of alluded to it earlier that, roughfish.com original it's very archaic technology when you look back that far, and it was all coded by my brother Corey and living on a server in his basement. It was every time you logged in, David, you were hitting his server that was sitting next to the ottoman, and it was the thing we had then. And as social media kind of evolved, more and more people, just the ease of sharing your cool stuff, right? Your catches and everything. It's just so much easier to do it on a social media platform when you have, all the entire user interface and everything that you have is geared towards sharing stuff, not necessarily, it's just more difficult to operate on a website. And then it became more about smartphones and the ease of a couple of clicks. You got Instagram, you got Facebook, and so it's no fault of anyone that, websites like roughfish.com fell behind, and not falling behind in a way of like content, but the forum activities and things like
Yeah.
that, and the sharing kind of the past, especially the past decade for sure. But thankfully we have our species accounts and pages. And the main focus, I mean, we've thought about just nixing the forum altogether, because sometimes you get a bunch of, okay, there's robot spam hitting us.
Yeah, I've seen it a few times.
Pornography or something, and this is down, and folks are getting in arguments about some crap. It can be a headache at times. And we've thought about shutting the forum down. And then what is the site? It's really a wealth of information about all of our species,
Mm-hmm.
and at the heart of it, that's what it's about. And it's about sharing your experiences with those fish. Everything can be considered an adventure. You may go to Spain to chase barbel or something, or you might go catch some bullheads in your backyard pond. Depending on your mindset at the time, that can be the biggest adventure that you need at that time. And it's important. So the evolution of technology and fishing has been, it causes a lot of drama nowadays. It can, with certain communities, because there's oversharing, right? And I don't want you to steal my spot, and there's spot stealing and all of these things happening, and people not believing others, and there's all kinds of drama. But having a solid community of people, you avoid all of that. And you kind of alluded to that point with the Rough-Fish community, which is not just the website, not just the Facebook group, but kind of this community that's evolved since roughfish.com became a thing. We do share a lot, and we do want to help each other out, and we do want to, have a good time. I don't care if I catch this fish. If I'm sitting next to you, I'm really happy and stoked that you caught it, and we can, we can share that stuff. What was your second part of the question about the evolution of something?
I think, it's one of those topics I wanted to see what you felt about. Was more so like, I feel like back in those early stages, it's hard for me to tell if it's so much that it was rare to find people that were interested in that kind of fishing, or that like, those kind of people existed, but you just couldn't find them. Where, obviously now you can find everybody. It's much easier to, these people are all exposed by social media. But I tend to believe that there is a positive shift in the perception of a lot of these fish that has happened over the last 2 decades. But I was curious, because you've really been in the trenches watching this evolve over time. But curious what you've observed over time with the way people feel about some of these fish. And now, and again, people are like, what are you talking about? When I'm talking about rough fish, we're talking non-game species.
Right. Yeah, I would define it as, non-game species, but they're large enough to angle for with traditional kind of tactics. So generally fish that can attain a pound or more. So I'm not talking about rough fish. Darters aren't rough fish, in my opinion. I mean, some people might make that distinction, but really we talk about and advocate for fish that are maybe, the average angler runs into them all the time, and they're pretty large, and they may be represented or not within fishing regulations, but they should be represented more. And in general, that means your gars, your buffaloes, all of the suckers, red horses and suckers and hog suckers. And then, there's some that it's like, well, is that a rough fish or not? When you think about like white bass, it's like one of those fringe ones. They're pretty popular now. Certain fish used to be rough fish, and now they're kind of not. And, it's just all about, like, for example, burbot in a lot of areas are considered game fish now, and we're seeing that with gar in places. So it's like, used to be a rough fish, now it's not. It's like a sport fish or a game fish.
Yeah.
But certainly, it's a lot of fish that you'll find in remote, out of the way areas or in urban areas. There's really no kind of geographical area that you can limit rough fish to. They're found everywhere, and that's one of the beautiful things about them. But the evolution of the perception of the public of these fish, it's changed so much in the time that I've been part of rough fish, and it's just amazing. And the circle was small at first, and it started growing, and everyone spread the word. Another thing you mentioned was being stewards, and it seems like the rough fish community, you just hear all the time, well, I was talking to a kid on the bank, and told him, yeah, you shouldn't throw that, fish in there, and or just teaching about like the sucker runs or whatever they happen to be doing, people on the bank side that they're advocating for these fish for. And that's really cool to see. And that's a big voice for our kind of message about these fish. But we can talk about that circle, and we can talk about the size of that circle, and compared to the broader, angling community overall, nationwide, I mean, it's still very small, and it's hard to get the message to a lot of people that have preconceptions about what these fish are, and really, kind of change their attitude about them. And unfortunately, the angling regulations, in general, don't reflect any kind of respect for these fish. So changing that, because there are a lot of anglers, you read through the regulations, right? And if they tell you in there that they lump all of these fish as undesirables with no limit on them, because of a law that's been on the books since 1947, that these fish don't have value. Why would I care about this fish? Obviously, they're overpopulated and have no use or any value to us, so we can just kill them indiscriminately. And really now, within the past, at least the past 5 years, we've seen movement towards state agencies and DNRs, listening to some citizens that have concerns about the unlimited harvest of these fish, especially when the harvest is being wasted. So there's one thing to harvest fish and use it and smoke up a pile of buffalo. Sure, if you use it, that's great. But it's another thing to throw that beautiful pile of native fish into a ditch, and that's where it becomes an ethical problem. Like you said, an ethical sportsman says that's not right, And for different DNR agencies to start listening to the majority, I believe, of people that feel this way, is going to be the next step, the next evolution of getting more respect for these fish in general. And it's just really, it's cool to see nowadays. There's everything from like the DNR agencies. I know a lot of really young folks now. They're like super gung ho on rough fish and the whole, whether it be multi-species fishing, microfishing too. And just appreciating the variety of native fish that we have. Some of them are going into the fishery sciences, and it's exciting to see them there making a difference too, because they're excited. They're they already have a knowledge of what they have seen in their fishing angling times and how they can make an impact within the agency. So it's kind of cool to see that. And just I can't talk about the evolution of the respect for these fish without talking about lifeless fishing as well. That's definitely something that my brother Corey and I believe we coined, and it was a thing back in the day where we just started keeping track of our own fish, right? Like, hey, this is fun, and then it kind of grew. I mean, there was a time where there was a while where I had the most species of everyone on the website. I think that lasted about 6 months, and now people have 10 times the amount that I do. But that really made people think more about, if I just, researching these fish online and figuring out how to use these resources that are available to them, like Fish Map and things like that, and saying, all right, cool, it's Saturday. I can drive to, Granite Falls and go try to catch a goldeye today and add it to my list and take a picture, and that really extended to people started traveling more out of state and learning things and buying fish books from different states. I'm going to go to Illinois because I want a shot at, a striper or something, or, I've always dreamed of catching an alligator gar. So I through the community that we have, kind of where to go, right? Certainly you need to figure it out on your own once you get there, but where to go. So life listing and that sort of evolved into microfishing, I believe. I don't know that microfishing would be a thing in America if it wasn't for life listing, because it's really about, it's not, and I'm not shaming microfishers at all saying this, but it's definitely not about the battle. It's about finding a location and scoring that species, really.
Right.
And it's fun. It's fun to a ton of people, and I applaud them for it. But it's just a natural extension of kind of our lifeless system that we built many years ago, and it's still running today. It's a big giant database that you can, add all your fish. So
no, I totally agree with that lifeless thing. I started with keeping track of it, but I'm the same way with you. I'm not even a blip on that radar. I think that species hunting side of roughfish.com, or just that, I don't know, the community guys that have those massive numbers, that is impressive, because that's like, it's sort of like I don't know, it's a quest where you can never catch all the fish. But when you talk about people who use like the term like the complete angler, or like you want to become more of a complete angler, to me it's like there's a direct correlation with and I get if you're talking about styles, like I can fly fish, I can use conventional gear, I can use spinning gear, I can use this and that. Um, but I think people's like species count is like that's interesting to me because there's so many different tactics you have to use to tackle all these different types of fish. Like your brain has to be so in tuned with the environment to understand like the different approach that something as dramatic as an alligator gar compared to something as maybe tiny as I don't know the rarest. I don't know my micro species. I simply don't. But it's never really been my thing, but I can totally see where those guys can get lost and become crazy in the pursuit of growing that list. But man, some of those guys that have those wild species lists, I think it's impressive as hell. I think it's as impressive or more than folks who have just a handful of gigantically massive fish. So it's like, pick what's more important to you, but totally agree.
Well, goals. People have different goals. It's certainly interesting to see how different people's paths kind of form in their angling.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, it's easy, and I want to get into this side of things. And you started to allude to it. The efforts, the conservation efforts. Now that is something I've really enjoyed watching. I hate saying that I'm watching it from the sideline. You try to promote the fish the way that you know how to do, but it's fishing's, especially in today's day and age, fishing's become one of these things where it's like self-fulfilling. Like, how can I help myself to these fish? How can I don't know, build myself up on the backs of these fish? And not so much, I don't know, getting involved with a cause. When I was first jumping into rough fish groups, it's kind of like, you're jumping into the club. Like you're behind the walls. This is where I can go to not hear people talk about that these are trash fish. This is a space where I can talk to like-minded people. But now today, seeing especially a lot of the familiar faces that I've watched for the last decade or two, coming from the other side of that wall or leaving those spaces to go out there and champion these fish, that is awesome. And I think that, you have really taken this baton and carried it so far. And now I know you've established this nativefishfortomorrow.org. And I really want to know more about that because I think that while it still sort of echoes from the roughfish.com thing, it's more of a conservation effort, that there's a much more structured approach behind that organization to affect change that transcends beyond just writing an article, making a post, talking about how fun the fish are. It's I know that y'all have actually got like, I don't know, legislative type work going on, but tell me about some of that because that's become a real fun thing to watch y'all doing. I feel like Minnesota, where you're from, has kind of like led the charge on, like, I don't know, across the country for how to push for these fish. But tell me a little bit about that you've started.
Sure. Native Fish for Tomorrow is a nonprofit that we formed March of 2022. It was essentially, there's been a group of us, really hardcore rough fish guys for a long time, who decided it was time to get a little more serious and take some action on this. And it was a mixture of things that kind of led up to that. There was some controversial things happening with live scope and stuff, and some there was a video at the time that had come out. I don't know if you recall that, but some guy had drilled a hole in the ice, found some wintering short-nosed gar, and basically dropped a spear on 100 of them or something.
I think I saw that. Yeah.
And then proceeded to wantonly waste them, and it really went viral because of our a lot because of our community and that, and the reach was far enough to reach the DNR, and knowing that, okay, again, these are things that may be legal, but they're not ethical, right? Like we've talked about, the general sportsman who is a steward of the outdoors in general, not just fishing, would say, there's nothing wrong there, especially when it's aided by technology like that. So that was a little bit of an impetus to get the ball rolling on gar regulations up here. And at the same time, people are saying, well, okay, and we were saying it also, why just gar? Why not more fish? Why don't there's all this research on buffaloes now happening with various aging, types and new things we're learning about population dynamics for all these different fish. And why shouldn't they be protected too? Not protected as in we can't target them, but hey, we shouldn't kill them all indiscriminately,
Hmm.
because right now you can. So, we formed our group to take a little more action and had, some initial conversations with our Department of Natural Resources, who we all kind of had certain ties to, in passing. And it's a favorable time to take a look at some regulation change here in Minnesota. So, there's other partners out there, and it's not just anglers. These fish are important to. I mean, eagles need to eat gizzard shad and red horse, and you have native mussels that rely on these fish to be their hosts, and there's just all of these different. Every time you peel off a layer of the onion, there's more importance to these native fish and how they add to the ecosystem. Whether it's through nutrient transfer on their spawning runs, or whether it's from just the fact that they provide forage for predator fish. So when you think about all the arguments there are for the benefits of native fish in the ecosystem, we have groups like the Isaac Walton League and Friends of the Mississippi River and others that might not be anglers, but they realize the importance of these fish. And so once you start to network with people like that, it just makes your case stronger. And the folks that are writing these regulations and realizing themselves that they haven't been updated for 75 years understand it's probably time to make some change here. So we have some, we've backed some legislation. You mentioned the no junk fish bill, which is pretty exciting. And really the goal of that bill is to remove the term rough fish from all of our fishing regulations. And right now, all of our fish are, that aren't game fish, they're lumped into this rough fish category. And we're looking for at least families of fishes being called out and say, yeah, maybe the limit, it's not unlimited anymore. Maybe it's 20, but that's probably enough for a day for your family, and the DNR is taking these under advisement. And now we have what's called a native fish work group within the Minnesota DNR, and there's representatives there. It's brand new. The first session is actually coming up this next week. But there's representatives there from the bow fishing community and the commercial fishing, community, which obviously those are two communities of people that, one, it's their livelihood that's on the line here, and we need to account for that. There's very large buffalo harvest and catfish and things up here. And number two, the bowfishers, that's part of their tradition, and we need to respect that as well. But having all of these different they all advocate for it in a different way, but how do we come to common ground? It's really going to be interesting how this all shakes out in Minnesota. So we're looking for even gradual change, even incremental steps towards our goal of having everyone. I mean, listen, I don't want to shut fishing down. I mean, if there hasn't been enough research on many of these fish, and that's another thing that we really push for. It's like, can we get grants so we can do some telemetry studies on bluesuckers or something, or whatever it might be in Minnesota, and similarly throughout the nation. It's like we need more research, and that. I mean, there's just not research on these other fish. The agencies would love to have the funds to do it, but they have to stock a bunch of walleyes, so they're busy, So we're really advocating for the more information and data and science on these fish, and then let's make some regulations that follow that science, whatever that means. I think that pretty much sums up what Native Fish for Tomorrow is doing. I mean, we're doing outreach, we're doing community work. We have a lot of stuff planned for this summer, but really we're involved with these bills right now and trying to back them. We have plans to do educational things like signage at rivers in various spots saying, hey, here's some cool native fish that live in these waters, and just educating that way. We've heard that that's a pretty effective way to spread the word at the boat launches and stuff, like people look at those signs. So a lot of times people, again, have these preconceptions because they just don't know. And if they're told that, these all aren't all of these different looking fish, there's 6 fish here. They're not all carp, and none of them are carp, in fact, and all of them are native. Most people know, they think it's kind of cool, So, we're trying to do some different things like that as well, but it's a lot of, we really want to impact change on the way that they're regulated.
Yeah.
And it's a good place to start in Minnesota, because Corey and I have worked very hard over the years, and it's, to advocate for those fish here. But we're spreading the word, and we feel like Minnesota, whatever we get done in Minnesota, is going to be a blueprint for other states.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah, I think that's undeniable. I think if you start locally on your home turf, when I feel like ultimately or inevitably when the successes start coming from, the ripple effects going to happen. Because these type of agencies that are especially involved in conservation, they're going to want to like follow what's working in other places and take I don't know, a case study that has some tangible evidence that things have worked out well for them and then mimic it. It almost seems like everybody's just waiting on who's going to take the first step. It's all very common sense stuff. Anybody it can be people who have nothing to do with fishing can sit and look at images, those horrible images we've all seen of, piles of dead fish and things like that, and respond with outrage. But I feel like that is where y'all have excelled, because you've definitely chosen the right approach and the right voices to speak on behalf of this. Because what you don't want to do, and what I see a lot of people do, is almost take up arms and like want to wage war on like the other side. And I'm glad that you mentioned bow fishing and the commercial guys more reasonably, because I watch a lot of people just on Facebook or just, anytime I see those images, I go straight to the comments. I'm like, what's this going to look like? And it's, and I get upset about those things too, but it's simply not an effective method to say, we're going to get you shut down. We're going to make this illegal. First of all, it's extremely unlikely. It's almost impossible. And it's just it's not the way to gain buy-in, especially if you're trying to meet the opposite side, which a lot of times when you talk to these folks, you're not as different as they think. But y'all's approach has been awesome. I want to give a special shout out to like Tyler Winter, who's really been in the mix. I like his approach because he seems like he comes at this like, I don't know, very practically. He can speak the scientific language. He can speak a very practical way. And then he's also jumped into some of the entertainment side of it, with like the meat eater stuff that he's done. And you got to be able to do all of that. Because some folks, if you start speaking too much science, it goes over their head. Some folks, if you show them a giant fish and that you show them how fun it is to catch it, maybe that's, and that's the easy way. That's the very least that any of us can do, is to at least show how fun the fish can be. But at the same time, you got to be able to have those different gears. But the one gear that's not going to work is trying to shut the other side down. It's just, I don't know. I imagine the folks that are there and mediating between two opposing groups, and they're just listening to two people crazy yelling at each other. They're just they're going to say, you know what, next, bring us the next bill. This is two groups of idiots. Let's get this out of here. But I think the way that y'all presented it so far, from what I've watched, I tried to watch some of the hearings and stuff, and I'm all the way in Florida listening, but I'm like, this is awesome that it's actually moved to at least this far. But yeah, I had to mention that. I get in those debates sometimes with some of my good friends in this group where it's like, it always comes back to like the bow fishing thing. And it's I don't know, it's when I started hearing people say we're going to get this made illegal, I'm like, it'll never happen. You can get regulations put in place, some common sense approaches, sure, but outright banning and outlawing, I don't know if I like that mentality. When you start banning things, it only goes somewhere south.
Yeah. I wouldn't want that, David. I'm not
Right.
looking ever to advocate for banning bow fishing. It should be done with a little more reasonable, expectations for the harvest and maybe how it's used, I think. But there's, there's a ton of really responsible and great ethical bow fishers out there. And I've heard from a lot of them and bow fishing guides that are thinking it's a good idea to start thinking about a little bit tighter regulations on these fish. And we don't want anybody's tradition to go away.
Yeah.
It's an important part of the culture.
Well, sometimes I think the easiest thing too is to pitch to I don't want to say the other side even, but like the people that are more accustomed to like game fish, like the diehard bass guys, I guess that's always the easy Case in point, how will protecting gar benefit them? I mean, do y'all ever come at it from that side? I mean, let's say you're to approach these groups of guys that are, I don't know, maybe they got the wrong idea and they're like, I don't give a damn what happens to all those 200 gar getting speared. What does that have to do with my bass over here? I mean, how do you approach that side of the argument? I mean, what's y'all's approach to like letting these folks know how what you're doing is going to benefit, how protecting non-game species or rough fish actually benefits the greater ecosystem as a whole that benefits the more popular fish?
Yeah, it's a tough one. It depends on, kind of the attitude and the kind of preconceptions that the person might have that you run into. I mean, it reminds me of kind of there was an old thought in, fisheries management back in the day, way back in the day, where, people thought, well, a pound of fish is a pound of fish. So if we take out, 100,000 pounds of gar, we can put 100,000 more pounds of bass in there, and we'll just have a lake full of nothing but bass, right? Well, it proved to be a very bad tactic of fish management, and it's not something that works. It just doesn't work that way. Nature doesn't work that way. It's not just like a trout pond or something where you're feeding all of these artificial fish and they can just eat dog food and survive. It's an interconnected food web, and fisheries management figured that out pretty quickly. But that thought still kind of stuck with anglers over the years. Like, oh, well, I'm a bass fisherman. I don't, I wish this lake was full of bass and didn't have any carp or any gone. It's just not the case. It's all interconnected, and you can talk about when you talk about predators like gar and their importance. I mean, you can talk about how it's been a known thing. There's been studies, at least up in the Midwest, that bowfin really cut down on sunfish stunting because they eat tons of them, and they also help the golden shiner population because they have a symbiotic nesting relationship. So by having bigger shiners, you're going to get bigger bluegills and things like that. And just the overall kind of, that apex predator part of it with bowfin and gar is something that is really important. When you miss that, if you take that out of the equation, it's bad things are going to happen for the rest of the fish in that lake. They're just unchecked, and other sort of ways to not argue, but sort of answer to those questions. It's really what floats your boat, I mean, I'm not giving you guff for fishing bass,
right?
Or other fish that'll smack any shiny metal object, just because I'm a sucker fisherman, and you shouldn't do the same to me. Why would you mess with me? It doesn't affect you, and why would you, intentionally like destroy these fish for no reason when it's something there's not just me, but a lot of people think they're cool and fun to catch. So, I mean, that's always an argument too. If you run into someone on the bank and what is it to you? Really, it's too bad you're a little too close-minded to think about it, I guess. But,
yeah. I don't know. It's one of those things that I get caught up on wondering about, like where all of some of these preconceived notions began. Because when you talk about, I don't know, sporting qualities, and like you mentioned earlier, a lot of these fish are actually the ones that get the biggest, arguably fight the hardest, have the most sporting qualities. I mean, you think of something like I keep going back to like the gar thing. I mean, the most obvious one, something like an alligator gar, which gets to preposterous sizes. But even a long-nosed gar, they can get over 4 feet long. They'll tail walk. They're a hard fish to hook. So there's a challenge element. It's an active predator that you can catch with lures, but there's like a layer of more difficulty in the getting the hook through there. But it's like, you almost wonder how certain fish, I don't know, got left out of the conversation or where those things came from. Do you think do you think that it was the idea that certain fish weren't palatable and couldn't be eaten? Or, I don't know. I always wonder where that started.
It's interesting. We've done a ton of research on that. Obviously we're rough fish. So, it kind of relates to when, America was settled, in its first formative years. And there was such a thing as coarse fish over in, across the pond. Coarse fish were things that basically weren't trout or salmon. And, it sort of translates to rough fish here, but it's also been said that when they shipped fish commercially around in the Mississippi River area, especially, like they had fish that were fully cleaned and dressed, were going a barrel, and then fish that were just not gutted or anything or dressed would go into another barrel, and they would label that barrel rough because it meant it wasn't fully dressed. So those are just a couple of theories, but nobody really knows, it's just all we know is it's sort of a negative connotation, so I think it's unfair, but it's a word that I've come to love, even though I really want to get rid of that term in the verbiage of our England. It's like it's obviously been a part of my life. So
right. Yeah, that's kind of the funny thing. Is like for me, it was a good alternative to the term trash fish. It's like, well, that's a win. That sounds a little more politically correct. But then it's like you almost want it to go even further. And I guess in an ideal world, there wouldn't even be categories, but maybe that's not necessarily realistic. You want to break things down to a degree, but not to the point that it sounds like to say that one group is called sport fish automatically assumes that everything else not called sport fish isn't worthy of a a sporty approach. But it's a good point, though, when you talk about, I don't know, the colonization of the country. They probably weren't worried about how hard a fish fights. That's probably an inconvenience when you're trying to survive and catch something to eat. So, yeah, it's a good point. But anyway, we'll jump into some other things. I know you were recently, I was looking at your page. It looks like you're recently in the Carolinas, my old stomping grounds. What were you doing out there? A NANFA convention?
North American Native Fishes Association had a convention down there, and it's been a good time when I've gone before, and it was really an excuse in middle of March when we have 3 feet of snow here in Minnesota. It was like, okay, convention's a good, a good excuse to go down and get some warm weather. But it was a great time, and got to do a little presentation there about native fish for tomorrow to the group. And that was awesome. I mean, they've met us before on a rough fish kind of basis and stuff, but kind of letting them know that, hey, we're anglers, we're trying to make a difference where it counts. I mean, at the, grassroots level, at the angler level, and how we regulate these fish. Everyone was so super supportive. And sometimes it's like preaching to the choir, like your audience is generally, more accepting of the idea of fishing for these other fish. You may say it's preaching to the choir, but sometimes the choir needs to sing a little louder, so you got to poke them, and it's the native fish community is fantastic, and each group has their role to play. I mean, we talk about Native Fish Coalition and Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, and you talk about NANFA and Native Fish for Tomorrow and Rough Fish. It's like we all kind of come at this from a different angle and what's important to us and what we think we want to strive for. So it was great. The fishing was kind of tough down there in the Carolinas, man, and I hadn't been down there before. It's kind of a cold snap, I heard, so that might have influenced things, but we did have a couple of spots that when the sun was shining, we really got into some suckers that were staging to spawn. So like for me to see a new species of red horse was just like a freaking, it was awesome, man. It was Christmas Day. We caught the bronze and the slender red horse, which were fantastic. And then of course, the brassy jump rock, which I've always wanted to hear or see a jump rock. They have the coolest name in the world.
Yeah.
And they're basically like, the red horse's weird cousin too. So awesome to catch those in a couple of different environments. And then we did have a chance to do some night fishing and start a bonfire and cut flat and snail bullheads on a little river with cheap hot dogs. So that was a blast too. But, we fished around and tried a lot of spots in South Carolina, right around Columbia on the Broad River, and it was just not happening, man. It was not happening. So
I lived in Columbia for several years, and I always found that area to be kind of tough fishing. I don't know why. I mean, I like certain parts of the Saluda River. The Broad River was not. The Broad River looked like it would have a ton of fish, and I always struggled. It's funny you mentioned, though, the brassy jump rock. I remember when I was living in Columbia, and that's when I met another old school roughfish.com guy, Josh. Is it Lyson?
Oh yeah, Josh Leeson.
I can't remember how to. Sorry, Josh, if you happen to be listening.
Minnesota Bowfin Angler.
Yeah. So we both were like started on the Bowfin Anglers Group website, and then I jumped over to Rough Fish and saw that he was there. He might have actually been the reason that I went there. And then years later, we met up when we were both living in Columbia. And I remember I've been living in born in South Carolina, lived most of my life in South Carolina. Most of my fishing, like development as an angler, was in that state. And I was like, I have not heard anything about any kind of sucker fishing in this state. And then he shows up and immediately kind of makes waves catching one of those brassy jump rock fish.
Cool.
What looked like it might have been the same spot that y'all were at. And then I went straight there trying to catch him. I never pulled it off. I'm not skilled enough as a sucker guy. That's a whole other type of fishing that I don't know, man. I think a lot of people underestimate how difficult that kind of fishing can be. I don't know of another fish in fresh water that's driven me more crazy than different kinds of suckers. I remember up in the Ozarks when I was living in Northwest Arkansas. There's so many rivers up there, and I could be smallmouth fishing and see like these massive schools of, I don't even know what kind of suckers they were. Some red horse, something huge, like giant ones.
Yeah,
I mean there could be 200 of them. I'd drift a worm right through them. Nothing, no bites. I'm like, what in the hell? This is a whole different like beast here. But I don't know. I get so jealous of y'all's sucker fishing scene up there, especially. What is the real big one? Is it the greater red horse? What's the real, not the buffalo, but like the biggest red horse looking sucker?
Yeah, up here in the Midwest, it's greater red horse or river red horse.
River red horse, maybe that one.
Same, but the rivers are generally a little more torpedo and long shaped. The graders do have more of like a bullhead and a big fan dorsal fin, and they're awesome, man. My favorite fish. They're tied. They're tied right now for my favorite species, graders and rivers. So, hey, anytime you make it up to Minnesota, man, we'll hook you up. But it's funny you mentioned, and to be fair, the sucker family are my favorite fish in general. I love chasing suckers, and probably I hope to think a little bit better than others at it, because I've spent a lot of years figuring stuff out. But I've heard, and it proved to me also when I went to the Carolinas, that suckers down south can be a little more finicky, not as easy to catch. I don't know why that would be, and I haven't really thought about it that much. But I mean, it's just they seem to be like you're talking about, drifting over, dozens of large, suckers and not being able to get bit. It's like that seems a little more common down south than it is up north. But again, it depends on the situation. Who knows what conditions might be? And there's certainly times up here, depending on the sucker type as well. Sometimes they just shut down and won't bite. What do you do? Only the red horse know why, but they just do.
I don't know what. So, and I guess that was one of my questions. I was going to kind of wonder, like, for a guy that's so interested in so many different kinds of fish, I feel like everybody has like that one that's most near and dear to their heart. Or maybe for you, it's more of a group of fish. But I don't know, like, what do you, what is it about the fish, or like, what is the intangible that an angler needs to be good with that kind of fishing? Like, what is the layer of challenge that they offer that other fish don't?
Yeah, it's weird. It's a great question. People have asked me that before, like, why red horse? Why?
And I'm not asking that in a condescending way at all, but it's like, I'm always interested in like why people have a certain affinity to certain fish, because I know I have mine when there's obviously much bigger and more elaborate, more beautiful, and more pretty fish out there. But it's like we all have our fish.
We do. And I mean, mine changes by the seasons, man. I tend to chase different. My favorite fish is whatever's going to be biting the best at this time of year, man. Ask me in July and it's going to be longnose gar, but it really, overall, the red horse species just have always called to me. And it's really my upbringing. I spent a lot of time as a very young person, like, 3 to 10 years old, camping on the St. Croix River in Minnesota on the border with Wisconsin. And it's just the mystery involved with those rivers like that and these fish, especially the big red horses, like the river red horse, that, it's just, they're there. And until you target them, maybe you see them, but not until you actually angle for them and get one in your hands that you're like, wow, this thing is just living out there. And, what's going to come next? And sort of that river fishing mentality of, you might catch a drum, you might catch a mooneye, you might catch a catfish.
Yeah,
it might be a red horse, and that type of fishing has always really appealed to me. Just the mystery bag and the fact that you can catch multiple fish from a location if you figure them out. Now, there's also something to be said for pinpointing a specific fish and maybe sight fishing to red horse, and really getting it very specific to I'm targeting nothing but silver red horse today because it's, you know, they're up here by the spawning shoals and they can sight fish for them. And it's super fun.
Mm-hmm.
But red horse, man, they're just shiny. They're pristine fish. They live in clean water. They are built to live in the current. They're very streamlined, like salmon or trout, you know. And their runs, their spawning runs, are just something to behold up here in the Midwest. When the river fills up, you know, with the silver salmon up here, we call them. It's so impressive that this is just part of nature. It's something that we can all kind of witness and be a part of. And for now, thankfully, most of these species are plentiful, so we can enjoy them, you know, and let's keep it that way.
And now, what qualm would somebody have with the sucker? I'm assuming, like, oh, you know, you put two and two together, or people assume things like, you know, it's got a downward facing sucker mouth, so they must be eating all the eggs of the other fish. Like, is that kind of where people's mind? We don't have any suckers down here that I know of in Florida. I might be wrong. This far south, I don't know.
Yeah, probably not too far south, but I think up in the Chipola and stuff, you got blacktail red horse for sure, maybe gray red horse.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, there's a few. It'd be really cool to see those. You know, they're, I guess, the whole bottom feeder kind of thing, you know. But
right, yeah.
You know, you look at trout at the same time. I mean, what are the trout eating in the same rivers? The red. We catch trout that are just gorging up red horse eggs. It's like they're bottom feeding too, right? And they're eating fish. And you know, that's the bad connotation with suckers, I guess, and the confusion some people have thinking they're all carp, you know, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah, I can see that. Especially when you talk about the suckers, like the buffalo, particularly. But you know, that's one of those real fascinating cases. The buffalo, especially. I think roughfish.com is where I learned that those even existed. And then I knew ahead of time for whenever I actually encountered one for the first time. But that's another one of those interesting ones where here you're talking about a fish that can get 60, 70, 80 pounds native to this country. But hell, a lot of people don't even know they exist. Don't even know that they're out there. Yeah. Just a weird thing. I mean, and again, that one's kind of a growing scene to a point. But I don't know. I feel like in America, we're not really tailored to sit and wait. It's almost frowned upon in a weird way. I get hell from people all the time, like, "Oh, you use bait, not lures." I'm like, you take a diehard lure fisherman, and that'll be the first guy that starts cursing and screaming and going crazy when the fish comes off or something doesn't go to plan. There's no patience.
Yeah.
So I try to tell those guys, if you want to like really forge your patience or build your, I don't know, fortitude when things aren't going well, sit and stare at a stationary line for hours and hours and hours and hours and just have nothing but hope going for you. It's not as easy as it sounds. It's like the
Yeah, no, you're totally right. Yeah. When you're active and you're moving and you're, you know, making casts and you're covering water, it's easy to not catch anything.
Yeah.
You're busy,
and when you're doing that, you're anticipating a bite the entire time. Whereas bait fishing is like the bite always comes at the most inopportune time.
Seems like it. Yeah. Shoot, you just mentioned something that resonated with me and I forget now. Maybe it'll come to me.
That's okay. Oh, geez. That threw me off now. But well, I think I know where, you know, I'm always curious too, is you've obviously got it near and dear spot to your heart for the waters that you live on. But as a multi-species enthusiast or a guy that's interested in other types of fish, like what are the ones you kind of have your sights set on? I don't know if I want to use the term bucket list, but if there's a short list of fish within reach that you really want to get, maybe let's say 5 that are like species that you really want to go. It could be something that's right down the road from you that you've just not been able to master. It could be a fish that lives on the other side of the country. But like, what are the ones for you? Where does your interest lie?
Yeah, man, great question. I mean, I'd start that off with, I've never been much of a real big life lister, you know. It's like I like to learn. I'd rather learn more about my direct kind of area and stuff and advocate for the fish around here than globetrot for things. But that being said, I do have some fish that are very high on my bucket list. You know, number one has to be the blue sucker. I've never caught a blue sucker. They've always been this unicorn in the Midwest, and through roughfish.com's entire history, it's been a big freaking deal when
Yeah,
somebody
yeah.
figures out a blue sucker and catches one legitimately, and more people try it. And the more we learn as a, sort of a hive mentality about, to get to your point about people being willing to share at least tactics and general timing information and things like that, people have narrowed it down a little further. So I'm really looking forward to catching my first blue sucker, and I plan to catch it. They busted a dam out on the Minnesota River here in
Hmm.
western Minnesota, and out by the town of Granite Falls. And that's a river that the blue suckers historically ran up before, and now that that dam is gone, that the impediment to them migrating, it was super cool. I think it was 2 years ago, the year after the dam was busted out. One of the roughish guys caught a blue sucker up above the dam, and they're spawning up there, and they witnessed them. So I'd really like to catch one in that river, just as a testament to dam removal and the positive impact that can have. Number two, I've always been, it's funny, I'm a roughish guy, but for many years in my entire life, I have had a respect for salmonids. So, I grew up with a dad who really loved, the trout streams and stuff. And
Yeah.
my brother grew up that way, worm fishing, fly fishing, spinner fishing, whatever, and so I have gone places occasionally to target salmonids. So, we went down to Arizona a couple of years ago and got Gila trout and Apache trout. We've been to Alaska a few times, knocking those out. But there's really one species in the continental United States that I need, and that's the bull trout. So looking for a bull trout one of these days. We had a trip planned this year for him, but it fell through. It's one of those things that I don't want to do it cheap either. We're going to go probably hike 20 miles or so back into the backcountry, and
Yeah.
maybe haul some pack rafts back there and spend a week doing it. And that's a big one for me. I'm sitting at 20 salmonids right now, and I'd like to make that 21. Um, I've one thing I've neglected to go after around here is a goldeye. I've never caught a goldeye, and
Huh.
they live in the Red River in Minnesota. So just need to make a dedicated trip for them. And along those same lines is a northern sunfish, which is a cool sort of a relative to the long ear sunfish that lives way up north here. They're super pretty. They don't get very big, but they also, they live in a handful of places up north. So that's another one. That's four. Let me think really hard about my last species. Gosh,
That's always hard to do.
I only have one left. Yeah, I mean, alligator gar is high on my list. It really is.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I do want to go wrangle with an alligator gar sometime. I don't know if I'm prepared yet, but one of these years. And again, I'd DIY trip. That's the only way to go on my book. I'm not
100%. Yeah.
I'm not a dude that's going to go hire guides to do things for me. So like it would take some preparation. Thankfully, I
Right.
have some friends, you included, I would reach out to for some advice, but I know others that have done it. And, it's an accomplishment for sure, especially for, a Minnesota guy to go down there and be out of their element, baking on the mud down there and have some success. So,
Yeah. Well, that's one of those ones just as an American angler. It's like you got to take pride in like your heavyweight champions.
yeah.
I've always looked at it like that, but it's funny. I share the same sentiment where it's like I very much am into like traveling to go catch these, I guess you'd call it a bucket list fish. But
Mhm.
I almost feel like I'm chasing like a very specific experience over the fish
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
and I have all the respect in the world. Like I never like to like frame my explanation for this in a way that like craps on guides because I admire people who make their living doing that stuff.
Same.
By all means, people need to support their local guides, the people that are trying to make a living. But in the same way, I've got certain fish that I feel like I could so easily just go catch if I just dished out the money and had somebody lead me to the fish. But I'm afraid that I'll come away from that experience like unfulfilled. So it's like you really want to like do the research and like go at a very real risk of failure and like have to like work hard to do it. Now, I am not above, and in fact, I really have gotten to a point now where I like actually like the networking process with other real fishermen because I'm fortunate, and a lot of it is through roughfish.com. A lot of it is through these similar types of groups where you just, I don't know, you meet cool people that, maybe you'd be willing to go check out their home waters with them. Is that a guide? I don't know. Not really. It's not the same thing.
No.
But you know, I just came back from chasing the white sturgeon out in Idaho, and it was sort of the same thing. It's like at first I was like, I want to go to the Fraser River and I want to go down to those big mountain gorges. But I'm like, man, the only way to do that is like you're gonna have to get on one of those big jet boats with some guide service. And I was like, I don't know if that's really the way I want to do it. So it was a really awesome trip. We were like hiking down these canyons, like fishing from the bank with this guy who's like, you know, he's a metal fabricator and an engineer at a local manufacturer who just happens to be really passionate and skilled at catching these sturgeon. And awesome. And we hit a home run. But on the other side of that too is it's funny you mentioned bull trout. Apparently, like where we were at was like bull trout like village or something. Like everybody's talking about bull trout down there, big bull trout area. I was like, I don't even know if I'd ever even heard of a bull trout until I was down there in Idaho fishing. You know, we were at local tackle shops and stuff, and then they'd see me like, you know, that I'm from Florida. Like, oh, what are you fishing for? Trout? I'm like, nope. Bull trout? Nope.
Never
but
heard.
I'm the same way. It's like, I don't know. I get it to a point where you're doing something that flat out you're not going to be able to do it without a guide. Like if you're going to go overseas and things like that. But you know, another one that's hemmed me up is muskie. I've never caught a muskie. I was like, I know I need to catch one. I like feel like for my style, and what like speaks to me as an angler. I love big toothy predators. I have to have a muskie, but it needs to be like, I don't know why I put those stipulations on me.
Yeah.
But I got this guy that I'm buddies with that lives in Quebec. I didn't even think he barely speaks any English. But he fishes out of like an inflatable dinghy and he just catches huge ones all the time. So nice. that might be my 2024 trip, but it's like I don't know why. But I'm right there with you when it comes to that. I don't know, man. I think you have to inject a certain amount. There has to be a risk of failure. Even though that sucks,
yes,
when you go all that way and then it doesn't happen for you. But
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, I echo your sentiments that I know a lot of fishing guides, you know, and they're great, and I more respect to them than anything. And a certain, you know, a lot of people, their time is valuable to the point where they want to be successful when they go out and they're willing to pay for it. More power to them, you know. That's a great way to get out there and enjoy the stuff, enjoy the hell out of it, you know. But, you know, to me, you only catch your first of a species once, and I'd like it to be memorable. And to me, that means figuring it out myself.
Yep.
But more power to guides. And I've kind of always thought that I would rather be a fishing guide and out on the water every day. So instead of stuck in the office, you know, so more power to them.
Yeah, I thought of it too. And then I kind of realized the reality of like, oh man, if all my like finances to support my family hinged upon whether or not I could put people on fish, that might, I don't know. I admire the guys that are able to, and a lot of them have simply mastered their areas. It goes so far beyond just being good at catching fish. That those guys, so I admire them. Same thing, but you know, my buddies that live out there, if I'm gonna be guided, you know, more so just by a guy that I know out there, it's like, you know, when you don't have anything to gain from taking somebody other than to show them a good time, you're almost more enthusiastic about it. Because I have people that have come out here many times to Florida. I had a couple of the rough fish guys come out to Texas. And matter of fact, they came to the Red River with me. And we were not able to catch an alligator gar. And I felt terrible about it. I was like, damn. I did.
You know what, though? I talked to it was Eric, you know, about that trip. And, you know, he just had the time of his life down there. And that's the thing you get. It was a great experience, even though he didn't reach the mark of catching that species. It's memorable. And he's itching to get back, you know. So,
yeah. We caught a bunch of buffalo. I mean, that was still kind of fun, but you know, you always want to be like, you take it a lot more. I don't know. I love when guys come down and I'm able to show them my area and show them what I like to do. So, but anyway, it's fun. It's all part of spreading the I don't know, the enjoyment for different kinds of fish. And it's like, you know, who knows? I don't know, man. It's like when you have the knowledge and like you have the ability to affect positive change and you like consciously decide not to wade into that, not to share it. I just don't understand that. So I try to do little things here and there, but I feel like y'all have taken it such a bigger scale It's awesome what you're doing. I'm hoping to see more states get on board with it. Florida's okay though. It's kind of a weird place down here. I don't know. It's interesting. You don't see people hating different kinds of fish down here as much. Probably because the environment's too far gone with all these iguanas and pythons and
knife fish and stuff.
Knife fish. It's like they're all embraced down here. At least the people that I've come across. Every new fish. I've never seen somebody want to kill a bowfin. Even the Florida gar that are everywhere. Nobody's
cool
from that mentality, which is nice to see. Maybe I'm just missing them. I'm sure they're out there, but they're few and far between. But
that's good to hear. Yeah.
But anyway, man, I know we're kind of coming up on my time limitation.
Sure.
Got kids to feed and homework to do. But seriously, I want people who are listening that are interested in some of the stuff that you're doing to know where to go to. And I know we've mentioned roughfish.com and some of the other websites and pages, but you know, I want to give you the opportunity to name like where people can go, like what are the websites that they can visit for information resources if they have questions about some of these other fish. During the course of this conversation, we've mentioned suckers and carp and gar and everything else. And, you know, for all I know, somebody may be listening like, oh, hell, I got a bunch of those in this creek down the road from my house and I have no idea how to catch them. Yeah. Where can they go to maybe seek that information? Facebook pages, websites, whatever.
Yeah, man. You know, a good start if you are on the Facebook machine is, you know, the Rough Fish Facebook group. It's just called Rough Fish. Lots of super informational posts there, and people ask questions, and there's really knowledgeable people that are ready to answer. You know, it's a great community. And that's sort of an extension of our roughfish.com website, where if you're looking for more specific, you know, you're like, I want to learn about the geographical range of a redfin pickerel or something, and what is their life history like, or, you know, roughfish.com has a lot of good stuff about that. Now, our new kind of effort, Native Fish for Tomorrow, we have nativefishfortomorrow.org, which is a website. On the homepage, we generally try to keep current on some of the things with the legislation going on, the No Junk Fish bill, for example, and where we're getting involved there. So we have some news updates there and stuff. And, you know, I'd ask if you're interested in our cause. We talked about it a little bit, and, you know, we're trying to impact change when it comes to both public perception and the angling regulations for all of these other fish, and things beyond sport fish and game fish, you know, our beloved quote unquote rough fish. And, you know, it mean a lot to get a donation there. You can donate on nativefishfortomorrow.org. Every single penny goes to, you know, we're trying to make signs for accesses about information, or we're trying to, you know, put a little money aside here and there for, you know, contributing some DNR grants to get some research done on some things. And, you know, none of it goes in our pocket. So and then, you know, if you want to follow my exploits, I guess I don't update Instagram too much these days, but I plan on doing more once it thaws out outside here. But I'm roughfish_Drew. You can follow me there. And really that's about it. You know, if you have specific questions, you can reach out to me, but the rough fish community as a whole, especially the Facebook group, you know, we have a bunch of moderators now that are really good at answering your questions, or, you know, letting you know what information that they have about stuff. And if people come there with questions every day, you know, it's a growing community, and it's really positive, and we try to keep it spam free as possible and stuff like that. So I'd really advocate towards people joining the rough fish community and just sharing your cool stuff there and bouncing ideas off of each other, you know?
Oh, 1,000%. I can't encourage people more. And I do this at the end of like almost every one of these episodes to try to push people towards the sites that the person that I'm talking to is involved with. But this more than anything else, I mean, I've been involved with some form of the rough fish groups that y'all have been involved with or started for, man, since I was asking my mom to take me to the local creek because I couldn't drive yet. And I've never stopped. It has always been the best resource that I could find anywhere for information on fish, people that are willing to share real information, not just generic things. You know, you maybe get a little bit of both, but and very fast turnarounds. I can't think of another place anywhere on the internet where you can post a photo, even a poor quality photo of a fish that you can't identify, Guaranteed one of the guys is going to be able to tell you what kind of fish that you caught. 100%. And it's going to come fast. So nativefishfortomorrow.org, roughfish.com, the Rough Fish Facebook page. Now, that's one that anybody can join, right? You don't have to sign up for anything, nothing.
No, anybody. Yeah. Anybody.
Yeah. So absolutely. If you're somebody that just wants to share what you know, even better. But absolutely, if you have any interest in those other fish that live in your local waters that you don't know how to catch, trust me, it's worth trying. And those are the pages where you're going to get the information that you want. But Drew, man, been a long time coming. I feel bad that it's taken this long to actually talk to you normal instead of through text. But
right.
I really, really appreciate you coming on here, man.
Great to talk to you, David. Take care, man. I'd love to talk to you again sometime. I think we could talk for hours probably here. So.
Oh yeah, we'll be in touch 100%. I'm not going anywhere. You're not going anywhere. But yeah, we'll do this again sometime.
Sounds great. Have a good one, David.
All right, man. Thank you for listening to the Boundless Pursuit podcast. If you enjoyed this show, your feedback, comments, and reviews are very important to me. Also, this podcast is just one element to a much bigger content outlet. I urge you to head over to www.haverodswilltravel.com, where you'll find audio, visual, and written editorial content. That is 3 dimensions of awesome fishing content brought to you by a very dynamic team of anglers. I hope that you'll tune in next week as we continue to build this program and have interesting and skilled anglers each Thursday. Thank you for listening.